Hi friends, good morning. It's 10 a.m. and it's a lovely morning to talk more about New Zealand. Thank you all for joining us today. We have an exclusive training session on visitor visas led by Immigration New Zealand. Before we jump right into it, I have a few housekeeping announcements. Firstly, please ask questions. I know most of you have sent questions in advance, but the chat tab here is for you to ask questions. So please ask questions whenever you need, and we will be taking up questions in the second half of this webinar. Next, a recording of this webinar will be shared with you in the next 24 hours. So in case you miss out on anything, don't panic. We will be sharing a recording of the webinar with you. Finally, on the top of your screen, there is a reconnect button. Which means if anything goes wrong, you can't hear us, you can't see us, press the reconnect button and you should be able to hear us and see us then. Now I'm going to not stand in the way and introduce you to Neha Bola, the Country Manager India for Tourism New Zealand. Hi Neha, over to you to take this forward.
Kia ora, thank you Devika for the introduction and welcome all. Before we start, I'd like to begin with a karakia. Whakataka te hao ki te uru, whakataka te hao ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. Hi hei aka ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu. Ti hei Māori ora. What that means in simple English is, seize the winds from the west, seize the winds from the south, let the breeze blow over the land, let the breeze blow over the ocean. Let the red-tipped dawn come with a sharpened air, a touch of frost, a promise of a glorious day. And with that promise of a glorious day, I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today for a training on visitor visas. I'd also like to acknowledge our colleagues from Immigration New Zealand who have kindly agreed to spend the next 60 minutes with us, talking through some best practices on visitor visa applications. I'd like to introduce them one by one. First up is Craig Walsh, Engagement Partner. I'll pass on to Craig for a short intro.
Thank you, Neha. Well, good morning, everybody. As Neha has indicated, my name is Craig Walsh. I'm an engagement partner with Immigration New Zealand, and that means I work with the tourism sector, which includes Neha and her colleagues with Tourism New Zealand, as well as some of the other agencies that deal with the tourism sector for New Zealand. Just in case you're wondering, the three of us are all in New Zealand at the moment. We're not based in India. We used to have an office over there, but processing visas, but that's no longer the case. They're all processed here in New Zealand. So, yeah, welcome. I hope you get something out of the webinar, which we've been planning for a little while now. And as Neha has indicated, if you do have any questions, some of you have submitted them already, which we'll attempt to answer as we go through the presentation, but feel free to put others in the chat. So, yes, I will now pass over to Jock.
Kia ora. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jock Gilray. I'm a Director Visa here at Immigration New Zealand. Director Visa means I'm responsible for some of our visa products. So I've probably got half a dozen products in my portfolio, but Visitor Visa is by far the most important. And my job is to make sure that the system is working well, it's optimized, and that we're delivering good service and performance. So really pleased to be here to answer questions, but also to have a bit of two-way dialogue to hear about how things are going from your perspective, because we know there are things that we need to improve. Kia ora again, great to be here. And I'll now pass to my colleague, Chris Adamson.
Thanks for that, Jock. Kia ora, everyone. Similar to Jock, I'm very happy to be here and happy to have the opportunity to speak to you all today. So my name is Chris Adamson. I'm the Head of Operations for the Henderson office in Auckland, New Zealand. And at the Henderson office, we process exclusively visitor visas, and we do the lion's share of visitor visa processing for the world. So certainly a big part of what we do is specialize in visitor visas, and we know basically all there is to know about it. So happy to share our experience and insights and what we consider our best practices with you all today. So looking forward to that. Hope you are too. Cheers. Back to Neha.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Now, there is one more key person to thank for today's webinar, and that's Linda Key, Chief Executive from Tourism Export Council of New Zealand. I know, Linda, you're on the call, so thank you for all the support for making this webinar happen. You've heard it from Devika and you've heard it from our colleagues at Immigration that you have the chat box, so do pop in any questions that you have. We will take them post the presentation. If we aren't able to cover all the questions due to shortage of time, be rest assured we will send you a written response in 2 weeks from today. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to Jock. Over to you, Jock.
Thank you, Neha. Before we get to the question and answer, I just want to take a few minutes to take you through some of our operational context, what we've seen since the pandemic ended and visa application volumes have started again. But before I do that, I just want to acknowledge everyone on the call and also to acknowledge Linda Keane. Great to be with you here. And in acknowledging you, I just want to acknowledge, I guess, the hard time we've all had during the pandemic and then again since the pandemic ended, because from our perspective, visa volumes have gone through the roof very quickly. It's taken us a while to adjust to that. And I want to give you a bit of that context now. So I'm going to show you, I'm sure most of the people on the call are very interested in numbers, graphs, charts, and trends. So I'm going to show you a few of those graphs before we get to the Q&A section. So what you see in front of you here is a graph indicating visitor visa volumes that we've received from India. It actually goes back to January 2019. So you can see from January 2019 on the left to March 2020, we saw a drop off as the pandemic started, and then very low levels during the pandemic as certain specified people were able to come in. And then New Zealand's border reopened fully to everyone in August 2022. And you can see that very clearly on this graph when for India, visitor visa submissions went from around 1,000 a month before that up to 13,000 in 1 month. So we saw very heavy demand in that August, and it was much more than we anticipated. And I suppose for us processing those visas, India was only part of the story. We had all the rest of the countries around the world that required visas as well. When we look at the India market, when that happened, it was largely driven by family reunification visits. So lots of people looking to come out here to visit their family members in New Zealand. What we saw after that was that application volumes dropped off, and you can see that in the last third of that graph. But then they picked up again through the middle of 2023. And these weren't necessarily family-related applications. They were more general visitor visa applications. People coming for tourism or saying that they were coming for tourism. What we found in practice was that there was quite a high proportion of low-quality applications in that surge that you can see through to August 2023. And this impacted our ability to deliver fast visitor visa decisions. And I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. So I've got two graphs here. Hopefully you can see them clearly. In the graph on the left, we have the visitor visa approval rate for applications from India. And then on the right, we have the timeliness of visitor visas from India in terms of how quickly we are processing them. So in the graph on the left, you can see our decision rate, which is the orange line. And you can actually see, so the graph starts August 2022 when borders reopened. But you can see the number of decisions made actually increased through to August 2023. That's the orange line. But the blue line is the number of approvals. So what you can see through to August 2023 is we were making a lot more decisions than we were approving applications. And this is demonstrated by the grey line, which is the approval rate, which started out very high, near 100%. But as we get towards August 2023, you can see it nearly dropped towards 50%. That means, you know, for every 2 applications we assessed, we were only approving 1 of them. And that's quite a low approval rate. And you can see the trend was down to that month, but it has since picked up. What happens when we see that drop in approval rate is it impacts our timeliness. And if you look at the graph on the right, you can see that. So what we're looking at in the graph on the right is the blue line is the average timeliness for a visitor visa from an Indian national, and the orange line is how long it takes us to do 90% of applications. You can see actually since November 2022, there's been a good overall improvement in both of those measures. But if you look at the average timeliness through to August 2023, you can see that increased from 10 days in April 2023. That was the average processing time for a visitor visa in April 2023, through to August 2023 when it got up to nearly 30%. So you can see how these elements converge. A high volume of low quality applications, meaning that we're declining more. On our side, it takes longer to decline an application. So that slows down processing, and you can see that's what we were experiencing between April 2023 and August 2023. And I know from experience, I've worked offshore for Immigration New Zealand in markets where we process a lot of visitor visas. Timeliness is the most important thing when it comes to visitor visas. So we weren't happy to see that performance, but equally I would note it was driven by quite a high proportion of low quality applications and a higher rate of decline. Since then, you can see in the graph on the left, the approval rate has increased. I think we're up near around 80% now. And the timeliness has definitely improved since that period. So we're now at around 10 days on average for a visitor visa from India, and that's been the case since about November last year. So we're really pleased to see that improvement. I guess the point of these introductory remarks is that we can process good quality applications more quickly. An increase in high risk or poor quality applications is going to adversely impact our processing times. So the reason I wanted to get in at the start before the question and answer session was just to reiterate that we have a bit of a virtuous cycle here where we're all interested in good quality applications, and the more good quality applications that we receive, we can process them more quickly. So I'm hopeful that through answering some of your questions today and then hearing more from you about your experience, we can continue to see a high proportion of high quality applications, which will enable us to deliver a really fast process. That's the overall processing context for visitor visas from Indian nationals. I'm now going to throw over to Chris, who is going to take you through the next couple of slides. Over to you, Chris.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jock. Right, so the next set of slides, my portion of this webinar, I'm going to talk through some of the questions that came through that were provided before this session. And the first sort of theme that came up here was, what are INZ's expectations for documentations that are provided with visitor visas? And I just wanted to take us through some of the points here because they're quite important to our overall processing. So the first one is quality over quantity. And I just wanted to make a point here. Just because an application has 100 documents with it, for example, doesn't mean that it's going to be approved. So simply put, and I may state this a few times, but simply put, no application is guaranteed an approval. And our perspective is that we would much rather see documents that clearly provide us evidence that demonstrate that New Zealand immigration requirements are met than a bunch of documents that don't have much relevance. And something else just to consider is that the more documents that come with an application, it's going to take us longer to get through. So I'll just make that point again. So that's quality over quantity. While we have examples of the types of evidence we suggest you could include with an application on our website, and the link is provided below, what I will talk to is what we consider as quite typically good pieces of evidence to submit with an application. So the first one would be evidence of previous travel history. So this could be to New Zealand, and especially good if it is New Zealand, but also just travel history to other countries. And what we're looking for is that people have traveled, they've complied with requirements in other countries, and then they've departed at the end of their travel and returned to their home country. We also would like to see good, clear evidence of the purpose of the visit to New Zealand. Often if there's a family member in New Zealand they're coming to visit with, that's a good reason to come to New Zealand, but we want to see that someone has a genuine purpose for coming. We do also like to see evidence of the travel plans. What's the itinerary? What are they going to be doing in New Zealand while they're here? But we also want to see evidence of, say, work, study, or living arrangements in the home country, because the idea here is that if someone is genuinely intending a temporary stay in New Zealand, they will be departing at the end of that stay, and they'll have something to return to. So the idea is that they've got a good job or stable finances, they're studying and they've got study that they need to complete, or they've got some assets in their home country. That means that they'd be returning to, they need to go back to. So those are some really key perspectives from us in terms of what we would suggest is provided with an application. We've also put on this slide our suggestions for best practices. This is put together based on the experience the immigration officers who process visitor visas have provided to us, some oversight from the management in that group as well, because these are the things that help us get through applications before the travel dates arrive. So the very first one, I've seen a question come up on this as well, but we really do want you to submit your applications in a timely manner. The idea here is that you've got an application in at least 4 weeks or more before travel date. And based on what Jock was just going through, while the average decision time is less than 10 days currently, 90% of applications are decided in less than 30 days. But the earlier you get your application in, the bottom line is the easier it is going to be for us to try and get that decided before travel dates arrive. Another thing that often comes up is applications aren't submitted under the correct category. I'll talk about tour escorts a little bit later, for example, but if you've submitted an application under a business visitor visa and you're actually coming to New Zealand to do some work, that's going to stop the processing. We might have to go back and clarify a few things. We may have to even change the visa category. All of that adds a delay. The next point I wanted to make is just in terms of a timely response. So we do often go back to applicants and ask for further information or clarification about certain things. It is in your best interest in this regard to get back to us as quickly as possible. I will also add that we often will add a deadline to the letter that we send out. Now, you can respond at the latest by that deadline, but I strongly encourage you to submit a response if you can as soon as possible, sooner than that deadline, because as soon as we get that information, we can start to process it. And it may mean that we can decide the application even more quickly. I touched on this point before, but I just wanted to reiterate the fact that the documents submitted should be relevant to the immigration instructions. We often get quite a lot of excessive and even unnecessary documents provided. Really, if you can try and stick to the requirements of immigration instructions as best you can, and with the examples provided on the website, that would be in your best interest. And obviously, it speeds up our processing time too. The other thing that comes up quite frequently is English translations. I think the Indian market is quite good overall in providing English translations or documents in English. But if you have got a document that comes in and it's not in English, we may struggle to be able to translate that. We have very limited ability to translate documents that are not currently in English. So that may mean that we can't consider a document, or we've got to go back and ask for further information. Again, all of which is going to slow down our processing times. Another point I wanted to make was we do strongly also recommend that you review the documents of the applications you submit through. It's in your best interest. It will give you a much higher chance of success. And while I said earlier, we cannot guarantee an approval. No application has guaranteed approval from the outset. If you've looked at the documents and you think that what's been provided certainly aligns to our requirements, the chances of success are going to be much higher. And lastly, while we'll talk about this in a little bit of time, if there's an urgent escalation for an application or something's come up that means that we've got to get an application done more quickly than others, the best port of call is the Immigration Contact Centre. The details are on our website, but they are available. And what we understand at the moment is the average wait time is about 9 minutes. So you should get in pretty quickly.
Chris, can I just jump in there?
Sure.
You were talking about processing time, and I just wanted to reiterate a point that Chris made. The graph that I showed before said the average processing time is 10 days. That's 10 working days, so it's effectively 2 weeks. And the other point I just wanted to reiterate is its average processing time. So for every application that is done within 10 days, there's one that takes longer than 10 days. So please don't misconstrue that as every application will be done within 10 working days. But I did want to show you the trend, which shows that we have improved our performance quite significantly. I would acknowledge we have further to go. Over to you, Chris.
All good. So the next slide, I wanted to just talk about high quality applications and examples of what we sort of would expect to see in a high quality application. So I've talked about some of this, but I'll just labor the point a little bit more. What we would like to see is a very clear purpose for travel to New Zealand and evidenced by a credible travel itinerary. So like I said, if you're coming to visit family and you've got evidence of family living in New Zealand, We don't often need a day-to-day itinerary because we know that most of that time is going to be spent with family. But if someone doesn't have any other connections in New Zealand and they're purely coming for travel purposes, we would like to see what people are doing while they're going to be here. For example, if people are looking to spend a month and every day they're going to visit the Sky Tower, we wouldn't consider that credible, but we would like to see what people look to do. And obviously going around New Zealand and visiting the tourist hotspots is something that we would generally want to see in a good application. I did mention people being well-traveled. So if they can provide evidence of their travel to other countries, that would be useful. Evidence of visa stamps or passport stamps, things like that is very useful. If they've previously traveled to New Zealand, we can see that in our system. It would be useful to cover that off on a cover letter just to say, I've traveled to New Zealand before. What we can do is we can open up our system. We can see their travel history. And if they've been compliant with our regulations, we can see that straight away. And if someone has traveled compliantly a number of times, we'd consider that would mitigate a large number of the risks that may present with an application. The next thing I'd say is if the applicant has strong employment ties or strong family connections to New Zealand, or strong employment ties to their home country, we do want to see evidence of these things. So I talked about family evidence, maybe a New Zealand passport, or evidence of some family member on a work visa or on a residence visa in New Zealand. But also, if they've got strong employment ties to their home country, can we see evidence of a letter of employment, say maybe pay slips or bank statements showing their pay, things like that. So that is what we're looking for to demonstrate that they have stable employment of credibility that they'd be genuinely eager to return to. The next question that comes up quite a bit is the applicant coming for a reasonable period? Now, generally speaking, if you put yourself in a traveler's shoes, you might want to go travel for, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month. But very rarely would you see a genuine applicant come to travel for tourism purposes for more than a month. It's quite expensive in New Zealand. Staying in hotels is quite expensive. So if you want to stay for more than a month, we generally would like to see a bit of rationale behind that. Again, the exception would be if you're traveling to see family. We do understand that these travel trips to see family may take a little bit longer, so we do understand that. I do want again to say that all visa decisions are discretionary here. So even if you provide us all of this information, there may be other factors that we need to consider. Every application is weighed and balanced on a case-by-case basis. And just because there are these factors available, it doesn't mean that all risks that present with an application may be mitigated. That may mean an application is still declined, but these are the attributes that we would consider in a highly positive or high-quality application. Right, and that brings me to the next slide, which is what we typically see from low-quality applicants or applications. I'll talk through some of the examples that we see and some of the things to avoid or make sure that you don't do. I think in a nutshell, what we'd say here is there's a very strong lack of evidence provided to support claims to come to New Zealand, or evidence, very small amount of evidence provided to support, say, employment and things like that. So the first one here on this list is there's a lack of ties to their home country. So that could be employment, financials, family, and either that isn't evidenced at all, or the evidence is very limited or impossible to verify. So these are the kinds of things that make it difficult for us to have the applicant demonstrate that they're satisfied that they're going to return to India, say, at the end of their trip. The next one on here is the applicant probably or likely hasn't traveled to other countries, or is not evidence that they've traveled to other countries. Now, this in itself isn't a deal breaker. We do understand that some people are traveling for the first time. However, if it is their first time traveling, we probably do want to see a little bit more evidence in terms of a robust itinerary and other evidence, for example, a strong financial or study background in India that they're going to return to. So it's not a deal breaker in itself, but certainly if they've traveled before and they've complied, that would be more beneficial for us. The next one is quite an interesting one. We do like to see where people are employed that they have a leave letter from their employer. And the reason I say this is because if someone has told us that want to come to New Zealand for 3 to 6 months to travel for tourist reasons, and they've provided a letter from their employer that says they're coming to travel for 3 to 6 months and they've been approved leave, that's when we really have to take some common sense approach and ask ourselves whether an employer would genuinely approve that kind of leave. If I put myself in that sort of situation, unless I've accrued that much annual leave, I certainly wouldn't be able to travel for that much time. It would be a difficult ask to my employer, and I'm sure it would be a similar situation in India, but what we ask is, if the leave is for a large period of time, we do need to see an explanation for that, not just a letter from an employer saying, I've signed off this much leave, because that doesn't really amount to much credibility to us. It needs to be backed up with an explanation. Where someone is self-employed or with little to no verifiable evidence of being self-employed, again, that's difficult for us to have demonstrate incentives to leave New Zealand after visit. Again, this is not a deal breaker by itself, and these other bits and pieces that I'm mentioning may be something that people could focus on if this is the situation they find themselves in. There may be potentially unexplained discrepancies in submissions. We often see errors in financial documents, and clearly that's a concern for us. If we can't verify, when we go back to conduct verification, if we can't verify sources of funds or the bank accounts themselves aren't verifiable, all of these are going to be concerning for us and may result in a pretty quick decline. So these are kind of examples that we see. Another one that we do see quite often is, I want to touch on the credible travel itineraries. An actual example that we've seen is someone says their reason to come to New Zealand is to visit a grocery store in the Auckland Central Business District. That grocery store is just a regular countdown store. There's nothing special about it. There's no reason to visit that store apart from buying groceries. And that was presented in their travel itinerary. That's what they were going to do on that day. The next day, they said they were going to use the overnight to drive to Christchurch, which, as a lot of you probably are aware of, is in a different island. And it'd be very difficult to get an overnight trip on our ferries to make it to Christchurch the next day. So these are the kinds of things that we see, and we can see lack credibility. Unless they're explained well enough, we're going to have questions that we're going to ask. Right. The next question or focus of theme is something that came through quite strongly in the questions that were asked before the session. And it's about challenges with family groups or challenges with groups. And the question at its core was really, are family groups or groups being processed differently? We're noting that some are being approved, some are being declined, and some decisions are taking longer than others. So what I wanted to start by saying is that our new enhanced online immigration system is something that is continuously being enhanced since it was deployed for offshore visitor visas in August 2022. And we know that at the moment, one of the future enhancements is to better support group application functionality and submissions. So until that has been deployed, we've got some sort of tips that we recommend that you consider before submitting group applications or applications in our enhanced online immigration system. So the first is, if you can, please provide cover sheets with all of our applications that would be traveling together, and provide application numbers for everybody that would be technically within that group, because that allows us to cross-reference and then more easily locate those applications for the family. And that would help with us being able to process them together where possible. Another point for us is, please don't assume that documents provided in one application for a family will necessarily be able to be used for another application within that family. Each application is assessed on its own merits, so we do ask that you try and make sure each application submitted is meeting immigration instruction requirements. And finally, just a reminder here that children or dependents over the age of 18, there are some exceptions with the age of 19, but these children, unless they're considered dependents, they cannot be included in their parents' application, as they're no longer considered dependents. I also wanted to talk about grandparents. Grandparents also cannot be considered as dependents and therefore cannot be included in that application. So what can be included in an application, or who can be included? You've got a husband, a wife, and a child who is 18 or under. Those are the people that can be included in an application. And anybody else, because we've often seen friends, people unrelated to the family altogether. We've seen people employed by families try to be added to applications. Please do not do that, because we have to take those people out, and it does slow down our processing. And each, as you've seen, each little bit counts. The better quality applications that we have, the less issue we have processing them in a timely manner.
So just to reiterate that last point, if you're making a visitor visa application, it's a family can be included, but that's the two parents and however many children under 18. Wider family groups, they will need to make separate applications. So if there's grandparents going with a family comprising 2 adults and 2 kids, it'll be 2 adults and 2 kids as one of the applications, and then the grandparents will make a separate application.
Thanks, Jock. The next slide, the question talks about what about honeymoon couples, so where they're not yet married. So clearly if they're married, they can be added into the same application. That's not a problem. But what we're focusing on here is where, say the travel has been gifted to the couple and they're not yet married. That means that technically they won't meet immigration instructions to be together in the same application, and they must make separate applications. As per the previous slide, we strongly recommend that both applications have a cover sheet explaining the purpose of their travel, and if you can provide the application numbers for each applicant and those cover letters, so that we know that there is more than one application within that group, even though they're not technically a group. That allows us to more easily locate the applications, and when we can consider the situation holistically and make a decision. And again, as I said in the previous slide, please make sure that you attach to the application all relevant documents for that specific application. Don't make an assumption that we've seen all the documents on, say, the husband's or the to-be husband's application, and we therefore don't need to see applications on the to-be wife's application. Make sure that all documents are attached in both applications. It makes it much easier for us to process. Right, incentive groups. I think this one was quite a topic of interest. What documentation is required? So I just wanted to start by giving a point of clarification. Technically, immigration instructions require these types of applications to be assessed on their individual circumstances for the applicants that are coming. So basically, we do need to see the generic requirements met for a visitor visa. We need to know why they're coming. We need to know that they've got a genuine purpose for coming, and we need to know that there are incentives to leave or to return to their home country at the end of their trip. Some of the concerns that we do often see, though, is that we have people who might qualify for, say, an incentive group, and they'll get a +1 or a couple of additional spaces they could use, or maybe they don't themselves travel and they give up their space for somebody who's not actually related to the purpose of the trip. Now, these are the people that we often have concerns or run into concerns with. If there are people that haven't technically qualified for the incentive group, or incentive to travel, we may have further questions that we need to ask, because these are the people that often may not be, strictly speaking, guaranteed by the company that's running the incentive travel scheme. So other things that we'd like to see is if the company is not well known, and look, if the company is a very well known company, we will know that and we'll figure that out. But if the company is not well known, especially, we do want to see credibility of the company. We want to understand a little bit about its history, maybe a little bit about its background, to make sure that we can be genuinely satisfied that it's a stable and ongoing company. And a letter provided from the company or the person organizing the trip that undertakes the expenses, because generally these trips are paid for, the purpose of the trip itself, some kind of guarantee or responsibility the applicant will be coming for the purpose of that trip and then will be departing at the end of that trip. But we also want to know what the itinerary looks like, the duration of travel, all these sorts of things very clearly explained in the cover letter. And ideally, the cover letter would have a list of all of the people that are going to be traveling. And I know that sometimes can be difficult, but the more information we get up front, the easier it's going to be for us to put all those applications together and make sure that they're processed in a timely manner. The other thing I just wanted to talk about here is, especially recently, we've seen a lot of incentive groups or MICE type applications come through, where the applications are submitted over a range of dates, and maybe some come in at the start of the month, some come at the end of the month, some come at the beginning of the next month, and so on and so forth. It does make it very difficult for us to make sure that all applications are processed by the date of travel. Because largely we try and process our applications in a first in, first out nature. And if we're still getting applications, say, the week before travel, it's going to be very difficult for us to try and escalate them in time for their travel, because we would have thought that we dealt with most of them when they were submitted earlier. So that's just a request from us, is if they can please be submitted as close as possible together. If they can be submitted all on the same date, that'd be amazing and make it a lot easier for us to get through them all. Great, and I promised this earlier, but there's a little bit here about tour escorts and tour manager visas. So there is a specific category for tour escorts, but there's also work visa categories for tour guides. And these are two separate things, and I just wanted to go through some of this with you. So tour escorts essentially arrive and leave together with that tour group. So sometimes it might be difficult to differentiate between a tour guide and a tour escort, because there can sometimes be some crossover. As I mentioned, there is a visa category specifically for tour escorts, and that should be used for escorts. but a tour guide needs to have a work visa, even if they're doing a mixture of both roles. So to be really clear, if someone's being a tour escort and they're being a tour guide, they need a work visa, and that's a separate category of visa. It is not a visitor visa type. And what we're seeing and what we have seen is that people select the wrong category, and then we need to stop processing of that visa. We need to get them to go through the work visa process, and clearly this can delay the whole group. Okay, so what we ask here is that there's a clear distinction between the two in terms of the roles and duties. If there's any clarification required around that, we do strongly recommend that you get in touch with our contact center. And I've got the availability hours there, but you can also find the contact details on our website. The other point I wanted to talk about is for large groups, there can be confusion of the makeup of the groups. So there can be obviously tour managers, catering staff, employees, and another place that we want you to be very careful about the types of people that are coming and what their purpose is on that trip. If they're going to be working while they're there, again, it's going to be a work visa type, not a visitor visa type. They're not technically going to be a member of the tour group themselves. Okay, just wanted to call that out very clearly. Right. This next section focuses on some of the other key questions that came through in the build up to this webinar. So I'm going to read through some of these. Some of these questions came in verbatim and have been planted as such on these slides. I'll talk to them, but thank you very much for taking the effort to provide these questions up front. It has given us a bit of, I guess, insight into some of the queries that you guys have had. So the first question here is, what are the reasons for visa rejections despite providing all necessary documents and sufficient proof for funding expenses and return to India? So as I've mentioned a couple of times here, hang on a second, I'll just find my talking points. As I've mentioned a couple of times here, one of the reasons that applications are declined is because these are at the discretion of the immigration officer. Now, I did mention at the start that even if you provide a very robust application, it doesn't necessarily guarantee an approval. So we have a situation where we weigh and balance an application on its merits, and there are risks that may present with that application that we need to consider. So documents provided may lead to us having concerns, and just because you provide something that you think may be sufficient to alleviate any concerns or provide a clear pathway to approval, it doesn't mean that the immigration officer is going to see it the same way. So if the decision to decline the application is such, then the reasons will be provided in the decline letter. And I just wanted to call this out here. We strongly recommend that you carefully read the decline letters that are provided if an application has been declined, because they will outline the reason for that decline and what you could potentially do about that.
Just Chris, following on from that, I can see in the chat there's a question about what's the process for appealing or getting a reassessment. So for applications of this type, there's no right of reassessment. So I'm saying this to reiterate the point that Chris has just made. If someone has an application declined and they want to have another go at making a visa application, they're welcome to do so. The sensible thing to do is to read the decline letter that they receive very clearly, because that will set out the issues with the visa application that was declined. And then when the second application is made, make sure that you address those issues with that second visa application. But there's no reassessment process. And so the pathway open to these people who have a declined application is to make a further application. But if they make the same application, they'll probably get the same results. So read the decline letter carefully and address those issues when it's sent in is the best course of action. Sorry, Chris.
No worries. Thanks, Jock. The next question was, why are visas not granted to all applicants, such as cases of couples or family groups where one applicant may be approved and others may be declined? So I'll reiterate some of the bits and pieces I've said previously, but these applications have all been processed individually rather than as a group via our online enhanced immigration system. However, if you can provide more information as such, like the application numbers for all applications that are, applicants that are traveling together, that would be very helpful for us to locate them. However, that does not necessarily mean that everybody in the group will be approved. We do take a holistic view of the situation, and we do try and make the same, I guess, stable decision for everybody that is traveling. But there may well be reasons that there are people in that group that get declined, whereas others get approved. So that is just the nature of the immigration process. The next question is, in case of needing additional documentation, why are visas outright rejected instead of requesting the missing documents? I did want to just clarify that this is something that has always been the case. It happened pre-COVID, it happens now. Immigration New Zealand has the right to decline applications where the applicant is not in New Zealand without first seeking information in certain situations. I will say that there are certainly situations where the immigration officer will reach out for more information before making a decision, but it certainly isn't always the case. Right. The next set of questions are around the topic of visa application procedure and locations. So the first question is, where can one apply for a New Zealand visa? So we strongly recommend that you're using the online channels. So the enhanced online immigration system I mentioned a few times, that's available via the INZ website. But if you must submit a application via Visa Application Centre or a VAC, we do have a link here in the slide which you can go to, and that will direct you to the VAC website, which will provide you the information and address details, contact details for your nearest VAC. The next point we've touched on briefly already, and Jock did articulate a little bit, but how should you proceed in case of visa rejection? What is the process involved? I just wanted to talk through a couple of things that you can consider. As Jock mentioned, please note that there is no right of reconsideration for offshore applicants. So that there's no way that we're just going to automatically reopen it if you've made a complaint or something along those lines. If you think that the process hasn't been followed correctly, there's no right of reconsideration. We do stress, please, that you read the decline letter carefully, because that should be outlining the reasons and the themes as to why a decision was made to decline the application. If you wish to, after reading the decline letter, you can resubmit an application trying to address the concerns that were outlined in that decline letter. We will assess that application when it is submitted, and we'll certainly take into consideration the information that you've provided in addition to hopefully mitigate or alleviate the concerns that we raised with the previous application. However, if you do firmly believe that there has been an error made in the processing of an application, you can submit a complaint or feedback via our website, and the information is available on our website. We do endeavour to get back to you within 20 working days, within a month. Often we'll get back much faster than that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we will agree with the complaint that's been made. We may find that the process followed is correct. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. There is a channel for you if you wish to take a complaint up, but we will make sure that we review it appropriately, and we'll come back to you with our response. The next point talks about, on the document submission page on the Immigration New Zealand website, there's a header that talks about the household registration. The question here is, what does this mean? Are you asking for papers to prove ownership of a house in India? I want to be very clear about this. When we're talking about household registration, we are specifically talking about the household registration documents from China. That is a document that basically everybody has in China, and we do often want to see it because it does show their, proof of address, where they're from, and quite a bit of other background information. For India, we don't require a household registration. However, if you wanted to provide evidence of house ownership to demonstrate ties to India, to meet our bona fide requirements, that's certainly a welcome addition, as well as anything else I've talked about earlier in this webinar. The next question is something that has come up before, I know. You say on the immigration website that INZ does not recommend booking a flight or a hotel unless the visa status is known. However, as part of documentation, you ask for evidence or pre-purchase of outward travel. What does someone provide if this is not a copy of a ticket? So as I mentioned, the reason that we say that you shouldn't pay money up front before you get a visa is because a visa is never going to be a guarantee. And we don't want to see people in a position where they've paid money they cannot get reimbursed. So we don't necessarily recommend that people pay for travel until they've obtained a visa. But when it comes to the pre-purchase of outward travel, you can also provide us evidence that you have enough funds available to pay for an outward ticket before you submit your application. You can also provide a demonstration of the itinerary that you're looking to book, as well as evidence of sufficient funds to meet those travel requirements. Or if you've got some kind of arrangement where you've got a flight that can be reimbursed or moved, and same with hotels. Often hotels in New Zealand, you can cancel without any charge at all right up until the day before your actual stay. So to protect yourselves, what we're suggesting is that you don't make any payments that you can't get refunds for before you get a visa to come to New Zealand. All right, next theme is around fast track for visas or processes and communication queries. So the first question here is simply, is there a fast track visa option available for New Zealand visas? The short answer is not currently. However, if you do require urgent processing of an application, please reach out to our contact centre. We often and very frequently get requests for escalations for visitor visas, and we do our best to facilitate, where appropriate, as many of these as we can. And again, I'll stress this, but if you can make the application as far in advance of travel as possible, that will make it easier and hopefully mitigate the need to escalate. We do certainly understand sometimes there are reasons that are out of control. That may mean that travel comes much faster than initially anticipated, and we will try and facilitate those as best as possible. But as of right now, the current process is that you should go via our contact centre.
Hey Chris,
cool. Yep.
What are some of the genuine reasons that the visitor visa application might be escalated or prioritised?
Yeah. So often what we'll frequently see is there's some kind of significant event that's come up in New Zealand. There is, say, a family emergency that we'll often see, that people need to travel. And we clearly understand in these sorts of situations, if there is a family emergency or something happens in New Zealand to a family member, people need to travel as soon as possible. They'll put an application in and hope that we can approve it the day after or something to that nature. So we will do our best in these situations to facilitate and get these applications decided. So these are the things that we do often see. Yeah. Next question here is, how can someone contact the immigration officer handling the visa application? And the reason for this question is stated is calling the contact center isn't really a viable option because they keep us on hold forever. And since this is an international call, it isn't budget friendly either. So I can completely understand the rationale behind that. What I can say currently, perhaps unfortunately for the person that wrote that question, is this is currently our best contact method. You might understand that the volume of applications that Jock talked about before, and India is only one small part of our visa volumes. We can't currently operate a public-facing escalation or contact method because we'd likely be very quickly inundated with approaches that we couldn't respond to. So I do want to say, as I mentioned at the start, we have spoken to our contact center colleagues and they've provided us more information. At the current state, we are looking at a 9-minute wait time on average. And also what I understand is the peak times, they end by 4 p.m. New Zealand time. So 5:30 p.m. is about 10 a.m. in India. So if you're calling around 10 a.m. in India, you should get better than a 9-minute turnaround time for your call. So that should hopefully help. If you need to get in contact with us, basically come to the contact center. But if we need to get in contact with you, like I said, if we've got any further information that we need from you, we will reach out and we will contact you via your preferred method of communication. If you have contacted us or submitted an application via the enhanced online immigration system, we will often upload a letter to that portal. So please make sure you're checking that regularly to see if we've contacted you or attempted to contact you. Great. The next bit is around improving visa processing and getting access to information. So the first question here, we've touched on a little bit already, but what initiatives are being taken to improve visa processing times, particularly for the upcoming year? I'm just going to reiterate a point and then I might hand over to Jock just to explain a little bit more about some of the things that we've done. But as it stands, Immigration New Zealand aims to process visitor visas within 20 working days. And currently the average is below 10 days. And 90% are done within 30 days. We have certainly taken steps, especially over the last 12 months, to address processing times, especially over peak volume periods. But Jock, did you want to add anything else there?
There are a range of things we've done in the last 12 months to improve visitor visa processing times in terms of the assessment tools that our officers use, the letters that they have access to communicate decisions, the rules that triage applications, and we continue to look at everything that we do to try and improve the efficiency of the process. India is a significant visitor market for us. I think it makes up about 25% of the applications that we see. But visitor visa is by far our biggest volume product. So we're always working on efficiency measures, and that includes the training that we give to our staff as well. And I think we've actually seen a good increase in the capability of our staff because, when borders reopened, we had a lot of quite inexperienced staff who now have a good amount of experience in particular markets and are able to make those decisions more quickly. But rest assured it's something that we're always working on, because we're seeing something like 50,000 visitor visa applications a month. So we know that small improvements made here and there can actually add up to quite a big benefit, both in terms of our processing effort and efficiency, but ultimately the timeliness that you and your customers experience.
Cool, thanks, Jock. So the final question on this slide, I'm going to hand over to Craig Walsh to answer, but the question is just around TIP programs that were up and around pre-COVID, and are there any plans to bring that scheme back, because they were extremely beneficial? So Craig, I'll hand over to you for this.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, TIP, for those of you that don't know, that's the Tourism Industry Partnership program that we had. The short answer is no at the moment. It is currently being looked at by our head office in Wellington, looking at to review that program and whether to bring it back in its former state or something that may look different. So the short answer is it's being looked at. There's no indication yet as to when or if it may be brought back in, but it is currently being looked at, and unfortunately we can't give you any time frames as to when or if that might change.
Great, thanks, Craig. And that wraps this section of the webinar. So I'll thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand back to Neha for our next part.
Great, thanks, guys. I've been reading through the chats, and we've got a couple of questions. We have about 10 minutes to go through them. So I'm just going to ask them up front. One of the questions we have from Aman is, what are some of the considerations for issuance of single entry or multiple entry visas?
So I can probably talk to that one. Basically, the single entry and multiple entry visas are based on your request and what you ask for up front. Just be very careful about the amount of time that you're looking to spend in New Zealand. So we have a funds requirement. If you want to spend more than 6 months in New Zealand, up to 9 months in New Zealand, you need to provide evidence that you have at least $1,000 per month, New Zealand dollars per month, to facilitate your stay in this country. Other than that, we're still looking to ensure that you can meet our bona fide requirement. Do you have a genuine purpose for coming for the period of time that you're saying that you're coming for? And can you evidence that you are going to stay for a temporary amount of time and then go back to, say, India at the end of that travel? So the requirements are substantially the same. However, whatever your request is, we will look to facilitate based on the evidence that you've provided.
Great. Thanks, Chris. I've got another one from Paramjeet, who's asking, how far in advance of travel can one apply for a visitor visa?
This is an interesting one. While we're saying as much in advance as possible, we generally wouldn't want to see an application more than, say, 3 months on average. And the reason for that is because circumstances can change in that kind of window of time. So we've seen applications be submitted, up to 12 months in advance of travel. We might be able to assess that application right then and there, but in 12 months' time, that person's situation and circumstances may have drastically changed. So we would ask that you try and avoid submitting an application more than 3 months in advance. But generally speaking, 6 to 8 weeks would be a good window of time to really make sure in a peak period that we can get to your application in time for travel.
I guess you've answered the next one, which is basically how much of lead time do we need to consider for MICE application? So are you recommending, Chris, 6 to 8 weeks is the lead time?
I guess the difference with MICE applications is it can often be organizing a large number of people. So while 6 to 8 weeks would certainly be our request to get name lists and all that information gathered together, we do understand that sometimes that may not be as feasible. So ideally, if they can come in at least 4 weeks beforehand, and that we get notice of when these groups are coming, generally via Tourism New Zealand, an events register or a declaration, that would be useful so that we're aware that they're coming and we can process them proactively.
Great. I think Amit asked a question, but I think you've kind of addressed it, Amit. So your question was, does it help to have a good past travel history? And I think Chris kind of addressed it, that if you do have travel history of the applicant, please upload, valid visas of the applicant as well. That really helps.
So I'll just jump in and say it's about the evidence you can show us of that. You might have a good travel history, but fail to show us much evidence of that. So make sure you upload evidence demonstrating that, and our immigration officer will be very pleased to see it, because someone with a really good travel history is more likely to be approved.
So, Jock, when you say travel history, does it mean you can show passport entry exit stamps of that country along with the visa?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect. Great. I've got one from Vikas, which is asking, when we have uploaded the bank statement under evidence of sufficient to support all applicants, then what do we need to submit under evidence of sufficient fund to purchase onward travel and outward travel?
So you could use the same documents again. So what we're looking for is that there are sufficient funds available to you to be able to buy an airplane ticket to leave New Zealand at the end of your stay. So you don't, like we said, and I said earlier in the slide, you don't necessarily have to provide evidence of the outward ticket, but it's sufficient evidence of money. Noting that we'd also need to consider the duration of stay and the money that you require for each month in New Zealand as well. There needs to be enough money to cover all of that.
Okay. I think one of the questions on tour managers, but I think you made it very clear though. I just wanted to ask, does tour escort come under visitor visa? I know that you mentioned tour leader is very separate, but does a tour escort come under visitor visa?
So one of our specialist categories of visitor visa is a tour escort. Yeah, so visitor visa, tour escort is the category, and tour guide is the more separate one, and that is a work visa.
All right. Another question is for tour managers visa applications. What documents should we provide to get a longer duration visa? Because they're required, and while they're going to a work category, but because they're quite required to come back and forth with the groups. So is there a recommendation on any specific documentation that they can give additional for, let's say, a validity of 1 year?
That'd be something that we'd have to explore a little bit further. It's a work visa type category, but we can provide perhaps a little bit more information by taking this offline.
Yeah, just to be clear, Chris's team process visitor visas. That's a work visa, so we can take the question away and
Yep.
hopefully answer that after this.
Sure, Joe. Another question that Maitri had was, do we need to have a separate set of documents for each of the family members? I think, Chris, you mentioned that please attach documents to each applicant. Don't presume that if you've applied it to the main applicant. Okay.
Yeah. So just to be clear on that, though, it doesn't mean that the documents have to be different. It could be the same documents, but please just make sure they're attached for every person that's coming, because in our system, they read as individual applications. And we want to make sure that each applicant has got the same kind of weighing and balancing processes involved in their decision. And to do that, we need to see all of the documents that are relevant to that application.
Great. I'm going to take the last two questions on the balance questions. Whatever people's asked, we'll send a written response. The second last one is, what if the recently married couple don't have name endorsed on each other's passports because they've just recently got married? What evidence can they provide to substantiate as, they've gotten married? Is it like a marriage card with photographs, or what's the kind of documentation you would need there?
So I guess what would be useful is, we know that the endorsement on the passport is a useful measure for when people have officially recognized their marriage and they've gone and got their passports updated. But that doesn't mean that they're married by law in the strictest sense of the term. So if we've got a marriage card or some kind of document that evidences the marriage is illegal and has occurred, then we're happy to consider that, and they can be included in the application together. Effectively, we just need to see that they're married. The evidence in the passport is a nice to have.
Okay. And one last question that I'm going to take, which Raj has asked. You talk about application numbers to cross-reference applicants in the same group. Is this something that gets self-generated? I'm assuming this is the reference number that comes when you start an application.
So in one of our older systems, there is a reference number that is created for a group. So that's a separate thing. So if you want to use one of those legacy systems, that works a little bit differently. But what we're seeing is most people currently are using the enhanced online immigration system. Now, there's no groups functionality currently available. So when someone submits an application, they can only do one by one. So when you generate an application, before it's submitted, it generates a reference number for the application. It'll be VV something, 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 something. Please take that application number and paste it into a cover letter, and that cover letter needs to be attached to each application for the people traveling together, because there's no group that they'll be put into, which could effectively mean that those applications are processed by different people in different offices across New Zealand.
Great. We've got another bunch of questions coming up. We'll consolidate these questions and I'll get a response back to you guys in about 2 weeks from now through our colleagues. But we're gonna put a hard stop. So just before we close, I am going to end. Firstly, thank you guys once again for doing this. And
Sorry,
hope
Neha, can I just jump in?
Sure.
I noticed in the chat there are some questions where people are asking about individual visa applications. We probably won't be able to answer those in our responses. It's just generic replies we'll be able to give, but we won't be able to. Some people are saying why was an application declined and things like that. So I just wanted to make the point that we're not really here to be able to discuss individual visa applications.
That's fine. Thanks, Greg, for spelling that out. But
yeah, it was just in case people thought they were going to get an answer to their question. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, great. Thanks for clarifying. But thank you guys for attending. And we are hoping that today's session has helped you in getting some clarity on visitor visas moving forward. Before I pass back to Devika, I will end with a karakia. Kafakai ria te tapu, kia wai te ai te ara, kia tūru ki whakataha ai, kia tūru ki whakataha ai, haumie huie tai kia. And what that means in English translation, restrictions are moved aside, so the pathway is clear to return to everyday activities, enriched, unified, and blessed. Tamahi, everyone, and over to you, Devika.
Thank you so much. First, I would like to say a big thank you to all our audience. Thank you for being so interactive. Thank you for asking so many questions. I hope you got to learn a lot about the visa process today. A lot of you did request for the presentation. I just want to say that in the next 24 hours, a recording of the webinar will be shared with you. It will be on your email. You can go in and see the recording at your convenience. Finally, I would like to say thank you to everybody who joined us from New Zealand, and especially to you, Neha. Thank you for taking the time out. Thank you for being here with us and answering all those questions. It's lovely to have you guys address all the questions that our trade has. And finally, friends, there's a poll that has popped up on your screens that says, how would you rate the webinar? Please go in for a moment and respond to the poll. It's a quick response, and we'll go back with the responses of the poll as well. Again, a big thank you to everyone, and I hope you sell a lot more of New Zealand and send a lot more Indians to New Zealand. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.